Brenda Hargrove lunged across the aisle and ripped the oxygen tube straight off her infant daughter's face. The baby's lips turned blue in seconds. Her mother screamed, and Brenda, a flight attendant, stood there watching that baby gasp for air like she had just confiscated a bag of peanuts. What happened next brought the FAA, the FBI, and an entire nation to its knees. But before I tell you how this woman ended up dragged off that plane in handcuffs, I need you to subscribe to this channel. Follow this story all the way to the end and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from so I can see just how far this story reaches. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Nicole Patterson had not slept in a while. That was not unusual. Sleep had become a luxury she stopped expecting the day her daughter was born, with a hole in her heart. Later, Nicole still counted every breath Layla took. She counted them in the morning. She counted them at night. She counted them in the pediatric unit where she worked long shifts caring for other people's sick children. And she counted them in the dark of her apartment, when Layla's little chest rose and fell beneath the faint hum of the portable oxygen concentrator that kept her alive. But today was different. Today, Nicole was not counting breaths in a hospital or apartment. Today, she was standing in the boarding line at O'Hare International Airport with a diaper bag on one shoulder, a medical bag on the other, and her baby girl strapped against her chest in a carrier. And she was terrified. Not of flying. Nicole had flown many times. She was terrified because, for the first time in Layla's short life, she was taking her daughter high into the air, away from every doctor, every nurse, every emergency room that knew her baby's gem. "You are going to be fine," Nicole whispered into Layla's soft curls. "Mama's got everything. Mama's got you." She had spent time preparing for this flight. She had called the airline repeatedly. She explained her daughter's condition and asked what documentation she needed. They told her a letter from the physician and the FAA-approved device label. She got both. She confirmed her seat assignment and requested a bulkhead row for extra space. Confirmed. She asked if she could pre-board to set up the oxygen concentrator without rushing. The agent said, "Absolutely." Noted it in the reservation. She went through everything again, start to finish. She read the physician's letter out loud over the phone. She read the FAA approval number off the device. She spelled her daughter's name. The agent on the other end said, "Ma'am, you have done everything right. You and your baby are all set." Nicole kept that confirmation number written on a piece of paper in her pocket. She had it memorized too, but she wanted it in writing. She had learned a long time ago that when you are a black woman navigating systems that were not built for you, your word alone is never enough. You need paper. You need receipts. You need proof. The boarding process began, and Nicole stepped forward when they called for passengers needing extra time. A gate agent smiled at Layla and said, "Oh my goodness, look at those cheeks." Nicole smiled back and handed over her boarding pass. Everything was smooth. Everything was fine. She walked down the jetway, stepped onto the plane, and turned left toward her row. That was when she saw her. Brenda Hargrove stood at the front of the cabin with her hands clasped in front of her, scanning each passenger as they boarded. She had a face that looked like it had been set in concrete long ago and never softened since. Her blonde hair was pinned so tightly it pulled at her temples. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, not a wrinkle, not a crease, like she had ironed it with anger. She watched Nicole approach with a look that Nicole had seen 1,000 times in her life. It was the look that said, "You do not belong here." "My seat," Nicole said, holding up her boarding pass. Brenda did not move. Her eyes dropped to the medical bag, then to the baby, then back to the bag. "What is that?" she asked. "It is a portable oxygen concentrator," Nicole said evenly. "My daughter has a congenital heart defect. She requires supplemental oxygen." The airline has approved the device. I have all the documentation." Brenda did not take the documentation. She did not ask to see it. She stared at Nicole like she had just been handed a bomb. "You cannot bring medical devices on board without clearance," Brenda said. "I have clearance," Nicole said. She unzipped the front pocket of the medical bag and pulled out a folder. In it was the physician's letter, a printout of the FAA approval listing, a copy of the airline's own medical device policy, and the confirmation email from customer service. She held the entire folder out to Brenda. "It is all here." Brenda flipped through the folder the way a person flips through junk mail. She barely read a word. "I will need to verify this with the captain," she said, and walked away without another word. Nicole stood there in the aisle holding her baby, holding her bag, holding her folder while passengers filed past her on both sides. Some of them glanced at her. Most of them did not. She took a breath, adjusted Layla's carrier, and moved to her seat. She set up the oxygen concentrator on the floor beside her, connected the tubing, placed the nasal cannula gently against Layla's tiny nostrils, and turned the device on. The soft, steady hiss filled the space around her seat, and Layla blinked up at her mother with wide, dark eyes and smiled. "There you go, baby," Nicole whispered. "Nice and easy." For a few minutes, everything was calm. Nicole settled in. She arranged the diaper bag under the seat in front of her, tucked a blanket around Layla, and pulled out a pacifier. The plane was still boarding. Passengers shuffled past. Overhead bins slammed. A child a few rows back started whining about a tablet. Normal. Everything was blessedly normal. Then Brenda came back. She stood at the edge of Nicole's row and stared down at the oxygen concentrator, like it was an explosive device. "I spoke with the captain," she said. "And?" Nicole asked. "He wants to see the documentation himself." Nicole felt a flicker of irritation, but she swallowed it. "Of course," she said. She pulled the folder out again and handed it up. Brenda took it this time, pinching the corner between two fingers like it was contaminated, and disappeared toward the cockpit. The woman sitting across the aisle, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses and a crossword puzzle, looked over at Nicole and said quietly, "That device sounds like the same one my grandson uses. Never had a problem on a flight before." Nicole forced a smile. "We should not have a problem now. Everything is approved." The woman nodded. "I know. I can see that. Just want you to know someone here sees what is happening." Nicole felt a lump rise in her throat. She blinked it away and focused on Layla, who had grabbed her index finger and was squeezing it with all the strength an infant could summon, which was not much, but it was enough. Brenda returned a short time later. She dropped the folder on Nicole's tray table without a word of explanation. No apology, no confirmation, no. The captain says everything is fine. She simply dropped the folder and walked to the front of the cabin. Nicole opened the folder to make sure every page was still there. It was. She tucked it back into the medical bag and exhaled. Okay. The documentation was verified. The device was running. Layla was breathing. This was going to be fine. The cabin door closed. The safety demonstration began. Brenda delivered it from the front of the cabin with mechanical precision, pointing to the exits, demonstrating the oxygen mask, holding up the seatbelt. Her eyes swept the cabin as she spoke. And twice Nicole caught her staring directly at her row. Not at the row. At her. At Layla. At the concentrator. The plane pushed back from the gate and began to taxi. Nicole held Layla close, feeling the vibrations of the aircraft through the seat, through the baby's body, through her own bones. The engines roared on the runway. The plane lifted, and for one beautiful, weightless moment, Nicole thought they had made it. They were airborne. They were on their way. Everything she had planned, everything she had prepared for, everything she had documented and confirmed and triple-checked had worked. She kissed the top of Layla's head and whispered, "We did it, baby girl." The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers around her began to shift and settle. The hum of the concentrator blended with the white noise of the pressurized cabin. Layla's eyes grew heavy, and before long she was asleep against Nicole's chest, her tiny hands still wrapped around her mother's finger. Nicole leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Maybe she could rest. Maybe just for a little while she could let her guard down and breathe. She should not have closed her eyes. Sometime into the flight, Brenda appeared again. This time she did not stand at the edge of the row. She stepped into it. She leaned down, her face less than a foot from Nicole's, and spoke in a voice that was low and sharp as a scalpel. "That device needs to be turned off." Nicole's eyes snapped open. "Excuse me?" "The device, it is interfering with the aircraft navigation system. You need to turn it off, now." Nicole sat up straight, her arms instinctively tightening around Layla. "That is not possible. This is an FAA-approved portable oxygen concentrator. It does not interfere with aircraft systems. That has been tested and verified. It is in the documentation I already showed you and the captain. I am telling you it is causing problems," Brenda said. Her voice had no uncertainty in it, no hesitation. This was not a question. It was an order. "And I'm telling you it is keeping my daughter alive," Nicole said. Her voice did not waver. "I am not turning it off." Brenda straightened up. She folded her arms across her chest. "Ma'am, I'm a senior flight attendant with years of experience. If I tell you a device is interfering with this aircraft, you are required by federal law to comply. And I am a pediatric nurse with a critically ill infant," Nicole said. "I know exactly what this device does and what it does not do. It does not emit any signal that could interfere with navigation or communication equipment. That is a medical fact, and it is also an FAA regulation. I am not turning it off." The gray-haired woman across the aisle put down her crossword. "She is right," she said to Brenda. "Those concentrators are approved for flights. My grandson has one. There has never been an issue." Brenda did not even glance at her. She kept her eyes locked on Nicole. "I am going to ask you one more time. Turn off the device, or I will have to take further action." "What further action?" Nicole asked. "Are you going to divert this plane because a baby needs oxygen?" A man sitting a couple rows behind leaned forward. He was older, wearing a golf shirt and bifocals. "Hey," he said. "I could not help overhearing. Is there a real problem here, or is this something else?" Brenda turned to him with the kind of controlled fury that comes from someone who is not used to being challenged. "Sir, this is a crew matter. Please remain in your seat." "I am in my seat," the man said, "and it sounds to me like that mother has everything in order and you are giving her a hard time for no reason." "Sir, I heard you the first time," the man said. He did not raise his voice, but he did not lower it either. "I am just saying what I see." Brenda turned back to Nicole. The mask of professionalism had cracked, and underneath it was something raw and ugly. Nicole had seen it before. She had seen it in hospital waiting rooms when she walked in wearing scrubs and a stethoscope, and still got asked if she was there to clean the floors. She had seen it in parent-teacher conferences when people assumed she was the nanny. She had seen it every time she stepped into a space where someone with Brenda's face decided she did not belong. "This is not over," Brenda said quietly. Then she turned and walked back toward the galley. Nicole's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against Layla's back and willed them to stop. The baby stirred slightly but did not wake. The concentrator hummed on. The plane hummed on. And somewhere in the front of the cabin, Brenda Hargrove was planning her next move. The gray-haired woman leaned across the aisle. "Honey, are you okay?" "I am fine," Nicole said, though she was not fine. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her jaw. "My name is Eleanor," the woman said. "Eleanor Bennett. I was a school principal for many years. I have dealt with bullies my entire career, and I know one when I see one. That woman has no right to ask you to turn off life-saving equipment." "I know," Nicole said. "I know my rights. I know the regulations. I have everything documented." "Good," Eleanor said. "And you have a witness. I am right here, and I am not going anywhere." Nicole nodded. She could not speak for a moment because if she opened her mouth, she was going to cry. And she was not going to give Brenda Hargrove the satisfaction. The next stretch of the flight passed in a state of tense quiet. The beverage cart came through. Brenda was not the one pushing it. A younger flight attendant, a woman named Sarah, whose name tag caught the overhead light, offered Nicole water with a gentle smile. "Can I get you anything else?" Sarah asked, glancing at Layla. "She is precious." "Just water is great," Nicole said. "Thank you." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then leaned in close. "I want you to know that your paperwork checked out with the captain. There is no issue with your device. No issue at all." Nicole looked at her. "Then why is she telling me to turn it off?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "I cannot answer that. But I want you to know you are not in the wrong." She moved on with the cart, and Nicole sat there, with the weight of that confirmation settling into her chest. There was no interference. There was no problem. The captain had seen the documentation and cleared it. Brenda knew. Brenda had always known, and she was doing this anyway. Layla woke up hungry, and Nicole shifted her to nurse. The baby latched on with the frantic urgency of a child who had slept through a meal, and Nicole covered herself with a blanket. Not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted privacy. She wanted one small corner of this plane that felt safe and quiet, and hers. She was halfway through the feeding when she felt it. That prickling on the back of her neck, that sensation of being watched. She looked up, and there was Brenda standing several rows away at the galley entrance, arms folded, watching her, not checking on the cabin, not working, watching. Nicole held her gaze. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She held it the way her mother had taught her to hold it when someone tried to make you feel small. "You look them in the eye," her mother had said. "You let them see that you see them. That is the thing they cannot stand." Brenda looked away first, but Nicole knew it was not surrender. It was regrouping. The man in the golf shirt who had spoken up earlier unbuckled his seatbelt and walked to the lavatory. On his way back, he stopped at Nicole's row and crouched down in the aisle. "I do not want to alarm you," he said quietly, "but I just overheard that flight attendant on the intercom in the back. She was talking to someone about having a passenger removed at landing for refusing to comply with a crew safety instruction." Nicole's blood went cold. "She is trying to have me removed." "That is what it sounded like," the man said. "I am Frank, by the way. Frank McKinley. I am a retired postal inspector. I spent many years investigating fraud and misconduct, and what that woman is doing right now is building a false case against you." "What should I do?" Nicole asked. Frank looked at her steadily. "You document everything. You write down every word she has said to you, every time she has approached you, and every lie she has told about that device. You get the names of every witness around you, and you do not under any circumstances turn off that machine." "I was not going to," Nicole said. I know you were not, Frank said. I just want you to know that when this plane lands, whatever she has planned, you will not be standing alone. He went back to his seat. Eleanor was already writing on the back of her crossword puzzle, jotting down notes with the focused intensity of a woman who had written up more incident reports than she could count. The young mother in the window seat of Nicole's row, who had been quiet the entire flight, turned to Nicole and said, I have been recording on my phone for some time. I have her face. I have her voice. Whatever you need. Nicole looked at these strangers, these people who had no reason to help her, no obligation, no connection. And yet here they were, forming a wall around her and her baby because they recognized something that transcended their differences. They recognized injustice, and they refused to look away. Layla finished nursing and fell back asleep, milk-drunk and oblivious to the storm swirling around her. Nicole held her close and rocked her gently, the concentrator humming its steady rhythm at their feet. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence and the seatbelt sign flickered on. Passengers shifted, belts clicked, and the cabin fell into that uneasy quiet that turbulence always brings. Nicole tightened her hold on Layla and waited for it to pass. It was during that turbulence, with the seatbelt sign on and every passenger locked in place, that Brenda Hargrove made the walk from the front galley to Nicole's row. She moved with purpose. She moved with certainty. She moved like a woman who had made a decision and would not be stopped. She stopped at Nicole's row and leaned down. Final warning, she said. The device is being turned off or I am reporting you to the captain for non-compliance with a safety directive. Nicole looked up at her. Call the captain right now. Let him come here and tell me himself that a device he already cleared is a problem. Brenda's eyes narrowed. You think you are smart? I think I am a mother protecting my child, Nicole said. And I think you already know there is nothing wrong with this device. Something shifted in Brenda's face. The professional mask was gone. What was underneath was not frustration. It was not concern for safety. It was contempt, pure, undiluted contempt. Women like you, Brenda said low enough that only Nicole could hear, always think the rules do not apply to you. Nicole felt those words land like a slap. Women like you. She knew exactly what that meant. She had heard it in 100 different forms, in 100 different voices, her entire life. Women like you. People like you. Your kind. It was the same poison in a different bottle. Say that louder, Nicole said. Say it so everyone can hear what you really mean. Brenda straightened up, her lips pressed into a thin white line. And then, without another word, she reached down, grabbed the oxygen tube connected to Layla's nasal cannula, and pulled. The tube came away from Layla's face with a soft pop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then another moment, then another. Then Layla's mouth opened. No sound came out. Her tiny chest hitched, stuttered, and her skin, her beautiful brown skin, began to shift towards something gray, something wrong, something that Nicole recognized from her years in the pediatric unit as the color of a child who was not getting enough oxygen to survive. Nicole screamed. The scream that came out of Nicole Patterson was not human. It was something older than language, older than reason. A sound ripped from the deepest chamber of a mother's body where instinct lives and logic cannot reach. She grabbed the oxygen tubing with both hands and tried to reconnect it to Layla's nasal cannula. But her fingers were shaking so violently that the connector slipped a couple times before she could lock it in place. A few seconds without oxygen. Layla's mouth was open, but no cry came out. Her tiny fingers had gone rigid, splayed open like little starfish, and her chest was pulling in and out with the desperate shallow effort of a body fighting for air. It could not find. "Give me the tube," Nicole said. She was not screaming anymore. Her voice had dropped into something low and surgical, the voice she used in the pediatric ICU when a child was coding, and panic was a luxury no one could afford. She locked the connector in place, adjusted the cannula against Layla's nostrils, and held it there with one hand, while her other hand pressed flat against her daughter's chest, feeling for the rise and fall, measuring the rhythm of a heart that was already broken, and now starving for the one thing keeping it going. "Breathe, baby," Nicole whispered. Come on, Layla. Breathe for Mama." Brenda Hargrove had not moved. She stood at the edge of the row with her arms at her sides, watching, just watching, like a woman who had thrown a match and was waiting to see if it caught. Eleanor Bennett was the first one out of her seat. She was older, with a bad knee and reading glasses that were still dangling from a chain around her neck. And she moved faster than anyone expected. She stepped into the aisle and put herself between Brenda and Nicole's row like a human shield. "You get away from that baby," Eleanor said. "Right now, you get away." Brenda looked at Eleanor with a flat, empty expression of someone who had decided long ago that certain people did not deserve her acknowledgement. "Ma'am, return to your seat. The seatbelt sign is on." "I do not care if the president himself turned that sign on," Eleanor said. "You just ripped a medical device off a sick infant. I watched you do it. You are not getting near that child again." Frank McKinley, the retired postal inspector, was already unbuckled and moving. He did not go to Nicole. He went straight to the interphone mounted on the wall near the forward galley, picked it up, and pressed the button for the cockpit. "This is a passenger in one of the rows," he said. "A flight attendant has just removed a medical oxygen device from a critically ill infant. The baby is in distress. We need medical assistance in the cabin immediately, and we need the captain to be aware that this is now a medical emergency." The interphone crackled. A voice came back, confused and urgent. "Say again." "And a flight attendant pulled the oxygen tube off a baby with a heart condition." Frank repeated slower this time, louder. "The baby is turning blue. This is not a drill. Send help now." In the row, Nicole was doing everything her training had taught her. She had the cannula secured. The concentrator was running. Oxygen was flowing, but Layla was not responding the way she should. Her color was wrong. Not blue anymore, but not right either. A grayish pallor had settled over her face, and her breathing was too fast, too shallow. The kind of breathing that meant her body was compensating for something it could not fix on its own. "I need help," Nicole said, and her voice cracked for the first time. "Is there a doctor on this plane? Is there anyone?" A man a few rows back stood up. He was tall, in his 40s, with the calm, steady hands of someone who dealt with emergencies for a living. "I am a paramedic," he said. "My name is Michael. Let me through." He pushed past two passengers and dropped to his knees beside Nicole's seat. He did not ask what happened. He could see what happened. He put 2 fingers against Layla's wrist and counted. Then he leaned close to listen to her breathing. Then he looked at Nicole with the kind of honesty that only medical professionals share with each other when the situation is serious. "Her pulse ox is going to be low," he said. "How long was she without the oxygen?" "Not long," Nicole said. "Okay. The concentrator is running. Flow rate looks good. She is getting oxygen now, but her sats are going to take a minute to come back up. Does she have any rescue medication? Anything her cardiologist prescribed for episodes?" "In the bag," Nicole said. She pointed to the medical bag on the floor. "Front pocket. There is a pediatric dose of "I see it," Michael said. He unzipped the pocket and found the medication clearly labeled with Layla's name, dosage, and instructions. He read the label twice, looked at Nicole for confirmation, and she nodded. "Give it," she said. Michael administered the dose with the precision of a man who had done this many times in the back of an ambulance. Then he sat back on his heels and watched. Nicole watched. Eleanor watched. Half the cabin watched. And somewhere in that silence, the only sound was the hum of the concentrator and the rapid, fragile breathing of an infant girl whose life had been put in danger by the one person on that plane who was supposed to keep everyone safe. Some time passed. Layla coughed. It was a tiny, wet cough, the kind that sounds terrible but actually means the lungs are working. The airways are clearing. The body is fighting back. Her color shifted. The gray began to fade. Pink crept back into her cheeks slowly, like dawn breaking through fog. Her breathing steadied. Not perfect, not normal, but steady, rhythmic, alive. Nicole pulled her daughter against her chest and held her so tightly that Michael had to gently remind her to keep the cannula in place. "She is stabilizing," he said. "Keep the oxygen on. Keep her warm. Do not move her." "I am going to stay right here." Nicole nodded. Tears were streaming down her face, but she made no sound. She just held Layla and rocked and rocked and rocked, feeling the heartbeat against her own, counting every beat the way she had counted every breath since the day this child was born. It was at this moment, shortly after Brenda Hargrove had ripped the oxygen tube from Layla's face, that the cockpit door opened and Captain Robert Hayes stepped into the cabin. He was a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of face that looked like it had seen everything. He took a few steps into the first-class section and stopped. He saw Eleanor standing in the aisle like a sentry. He saw Frank at the interphone. He saw Michael on his knees beside the row. He saw Nicole holding her baby with tears running down her face. And he saw Brenda standing at the galley entrance, arms folded, jaw set, unmoved. "What happened?" the captain asked. Everyone started talking at once. "She pulled the oxygen off that baby," Eleanor said. "The infant was without oxygen for a short time," Michael said from the floor. "She is stabilizing now, but she needs continuous monitoring." "That flight attendant told this woman to turn off an FAA-approved medical device," Frank said. "When the mother refused, she physically removed it from the child." The captain held up one hand. The cabin fell silent. He turned to Brenda. "Is this true?" Brenda Hargrove uncrossed her arms. She straightened her shoulders, and she lied. "The device was interfering with aircraft systems," Brenda said, her voice steady and practiced. "I asked the passenger multiple times to power it down. She refused. I removed the device to ensure the safety of all passengers on board." "That is a lie," Nicole said from her seat, her voice raw but unmistakable. "You know that is a lie. Your own crew member told me the captain cleared the device. Sarah confirmed it. There was never any interference. You made it up." The captain looked at Brenda for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Brenda, I personally reviewed and approved that device before departure. There were no alerts, no interference flags, no system anomalies. At no point did I instruct you to remove any medical equipment from any passenger. So, I'm going to ask you one more time. Why did you do this?" The silence that followed was the loudest sound on that plane. Brenda opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I was acting in the interest of passenger safety," she repeated. But this time the words sounded hollow, like a recording played back one too many times. "Captain," Frank said, stepping forward. "I overheard this flight attendant on the interphone some time ago, speaking about having this passenger removed at landing for non-compliance. That was before she made any physical contact with the device. She had already decided to escalate this situation before she took action." The captain's face changed. The professional neutrality drained out of it and was replaced by something harder. "Brenda, you are relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. Go to the aft galley. Do not interact with any passengers. Do not touch any equipment. Do not speak to anyone. Is that understood?" Brenda stared at him. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, something cracked in her composure. Not shame, not regret, fear. The fear of someone who had always operated under the protection of authority and suddenly realized that authority had been revoked. "Robert," she said, using the captain's first name, "I have been with this airline for years. And right now you are going to the aft galley," the captain said. "Move." Brenda moved. She walked past Eleanor, who did not step aside, forcing Brenda to squeeze past her in the narrow aisle. She walked past Frank, who watched her with the quiet intensity of a man cataloging evidence. She walked past the young mother in the window seat of Nicole's row, who held up her phone and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I got all of it, every second." Brenda kept walking. She did not turn around. The captain crouched beside Nicole's seat. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. That should never have happened on my aircraft. I have already radioed ahead for medical personnel to meet us at the gate. How is your daughter?" "She is breathing," Nicole said. "She is breathing, but she should not have had to fight for it." "No," the captain said. "She should not have." Michael, the paramedic, looked up from where he was monitoring Layla's pulse. "Captain, I would recommend this child be evaluated by emergency services upon landing. The oxygen deprivation was brief, but with her underlying cardiac condition, there could be complications that are not immediately apparent. Her O2 sats are climbing, but they are not where I want them." "Understood," the captain said. "I will make sure they are waiting." He stood, addressed the cabin briefly, telling passengers that the situation was under control and medical assistance had been arranged, and returned to the cockpit. The cockpit door closed, and the plane continued on through the sky, as if nothing had happened. As if a woman had not just tried to kill a baby through sheer cruelty and authority. Eleanor finally sat back down. Her hands were trembling. She looked at Nicole and said, "In all my years as a principal, I have never seen an adult do something that evil to a child. I have seen some terrible things, but nothing like that." Nicole wiped her face with the back of her hand. She knew. She knew the device was approved. She knew the captain cleared it. She knew her daughter needed it, and Brenda pulled it off her face anyway. "I know," Eleanor said. "Why?" Nicole asked. And the question was not rhetorical. She was genuinely asking. She was sitting in a metal tube at high altitude, holding her sick baby surrounded by strangers who had just witnessed an act of violence against her child. And she was asking the question that she already knew the answer to, but needed to hear someone else say out loud. Eleanor looked at her over the tops of her reading glasses. "Because you are black, honey. That is why. Because you walked onto this plane with documentation and credentials and a sick child, and none of it mattered because she decided who you were the moment she saw your face." Nicole closed her eyes. She had known. Of course she had known. She had known from the first second Brenda looked at her in the boarding line. She had known from the way Brenda handled her folder. From the way she said, "Women like you." From the way she watched Nicole nurse her baby with the surveillance of someone who believed they were observing something undeserving. Frank came back to his seat but leaned into the aisle toward Nicole. I want you to know that I've written down everything. Statements, actions. I will provide a sworn affidavit if you need one. What that woman did was not just misconduct. It was assault on a minor. It was reckless endangerment. And depending on how the FAA and the DA see it, it could be attempted murder. The word hung in the air. Murder. No one flinched. No one said he was exaggerating because everyone who had watched Brenda Hargrove pull that tube knew something. They knew she had seen a baby start to suffocate, and she had not tried to put the tube back. She had not called for help. She had not shown a single flicker of concern. She had stood there and watched, arms at her sides, as if she had been waiting for exactly that result. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, appeared at Nicole's row with a blanket and a bottle of water. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I told her there was no interference. She told me to mind my own business and stay in the back." "How long has she been like this?" Nicole asked. Sarah hesitated. She looked over her shoulder toward the aft galley, then back at Nicole. "There have been complaints before," she said quietly. "Passengers of color, families. She gets reported and then nothing happens. She has been with the airline for so long that management just moves the complaints to a file and forgets about them." "How many complaints?" Frank asked. Sarah shook her head. "I do not know the exact number, but it is not one or two. It is a pattern. Everyone on the crew knows. We all know. And no one has done anything about it because she has seniority and she knows the union reps and she has been protected for years." Frank wrote that down, too. Layla stirred against Nicole's chest and let out a small whimper. Nicole looked down, checked the cannula, checked the concentrator readout, and adjusted the flow rate by a fraction. Michael watched her do it and nodded. "You know what you are doing," he said. "She is lucky to have you." "She should not need luck," Nicole said. "She should just need a mother and a working oxygen line and a flight where nobody tries to kill her." The plane began its descent sometime later. The captain came on the intercom and announced that they would be landing shortly and that passengers should remain seated with their seatbelts fastened. He said nothing about what had happened. He did not mention Brenda. He did not mention medical assistants waiting at the gate. He kept it clean. But Nicole noticed something. His voice had an edge to it that had not been there during the initial announcements. Something had shifted in that cockpit. Something had been communicated to the ground. As the plane dropped altitude, Layla's breathing changed. Michael noticed it first. "Her respiratory rate is climbing," he said. He checked her pulse again. Heart rate is up too. The pressure change from the descent could be stressing her system. We need to keep her as calm as possible. Nicole began to sing, softly, almost inaudibly. A lullaby her grandmother used to sing to her. A melody she did not even know the words to half the time. Just sounds and rhythm and the vibration of a mother's chest against a baby's ear. Layla's breathing slowed. Her eyelids drooped. She relaxed into Nicole's body the way only an infant can, with total surrender, total trust, even after the world had just tried to hurt her. The landing gear dropped. The cabin shuddered. And through the window, the ground rose up to meet them. The plane touched down hard, bounced once, and settled. The engines roared in reverse. Passengers lurched forward. And then, before the aircraft had even reached the gate, before the seatbelt sign had clicked off, before a single overhead bin had been opened, Nicole heard something she had never heard on a commercial flight. Sirens, not ambulance sirens, not fire truck sirens. These were different. These were the short, aggressive blasts of federal law enforcement vehicles on an active runway. Frank looked out the window. "Those are not paramedics," he said. "Those are federal agents." The plane taxied to the gate and stopped. The engines shut down. The cabin was dead silent. No one moved. No one unbuckled. No one reached for their bags. Everyone sat in their seats and stared toward the front of the plane because they all felt it. Something enormous was about to happen. The forward cabin door opened. 2 paramedics came on first, moving quickly to Nicole's row. Michael briefed them in clipped medical shorthand, rattling off vitals, timeline, interventions. They checked Layla's oxygen levels, listened to her heart, and nodded at each other. "We are going to transport her to the children's hospital as a precaution," one of them said to Nicole. "Her vitals are stable, but given her cardiac history and the interruption in oxygen, we want her monitored overnight." Nicole nodded. She stood holding Layla against her chest and began to gather her bags. Eleanor reached over and grabbed the diaper bag for her. Frank grabbed the medical bag. The young mother in the window seat handed Nicole the blanket that had fallen to the floor. And then Nicole stopped, because walking onto the plane behind the paramedics were 2 people in dark blue jackets with 3 letters on the back that made Brenda Hargrove's entire career flash before her eyes. FAA. Behind them were 2 more people. These ones had different letters on their jackets, letters that carried a different kind of weight entirely. FBI. They walked past first class. They walked past the captain who stood at the cockpit door and pointed toward the aft galley. They walked past Eleanor and Frank and Michael and every passenger who had witnessed what happened, and they kept walking until they reached the back of the plane. Brenda Hargrove was sitting on the jump seat in the aft galley with her hands in her lap. She looked up when the agents appeared. She did not stand. She did not speak. For the first time in her long career, Brenda Hargrove had nothing to say. "Brenda Hargrove," the lead agent said. "Yes. Stand up. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back." Brenda stood. She turned. She placed her hands behind her back. And as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, a sound rippled through the cabin that started soft and built until it filled every row, every seat, every inch of pressurized air. Applause. Every passenger on that plane clapped. They clapped as Brenda Hargrove was walked up the aisle in handcuffs. They clapped as she passed Nicole's row, where an infant girl with a hole in her heart was breathing alive, wrapped in her mother's arms. They clapped as Brenda stepped off the jetway and into the fluorescent light of a terminal, where news cameras were already rolling. Nicole did not clap. She stood in the aisle holding her daughter, tears streaming silently down her face, and watched the woman who had tried to take everything from her disappear into the custody of people who would make sure she never did it again. Eleanor Bennett touched Nicole's arm. "It is not over, honey," she said gently. "This is just the beginning." Nicole looked down at Layla, who blinked up at her with those wide, dark eyes and smiled. A real smile. A smile that did not know what had just happened. A smile that trusted the world because it trusted its mother. "I know," Nicole said, "and I am ready." The ambulance doors closed and Nicole held Layla against her chest as the vehicle pulled away from the terminal. The paramedic across from her was adjusting a pediatric pulse oximeter on Layla's tiny finger, and the numbers on the screen were climbing slowly, stubbornly, the way a body fights its way back from the edge of something terrible. Each number was a victory. Each number meant her daughter was still here. "Her seats are improving," the paramedic said. "But with her cardiac history, we need a full workup at the children's hospital. Echocardiogram, blood panel, continuous monitoring overnight at minimum." Nicole nodded. She had done this before. She had sat in the back of ambulances before. Not for Layla, but for other people's children, the ones she cared for on the pediatric floor. She knew the language. She knew the protocols. She knew what every beep on that monitor meant. And she knew that what had happened on that plane could have consequences that would not show up for some time. Oxygen deprivation in an infant with a congenital heart defect was not something you shrugged off. It was something that echoed through developing tissue and fragile vessels like a tremor through glass. "How long until we get there?" Nicole asked. The paramedics said a short time. Nicole looked down at Layla. The baby was awake, her dark eyes tracking the lights inside the ambulance with the unfocused curiosity of a child who had no idea how close she had come to not seeing anything ever again. Nicole pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead and kept them there, feeling the warmth, feeling the pulse, feeling the proof that her child was alive. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. She pulled it out and saw missed calls and text messages all saying variations of the same thing. "Nicole, are you okay? You are on the news." She opened the first text from her mother. It was 3 words long. "Baby, call me." Nicole dialed. Her mother picked up before the first ring finished. "Nicole Renee Patterson, you tell me right now that my grandbaby is breathing." "She is breathing, Mama. We are in the ambulance. She is stable. Her oxygen is coming back up. I saw it on the television, Nicole. I saw them walk that woman off the plane in handcuffs. Channel 5 had it live. What did she do to Layla? What happened?" "Mama, I cannot talk about all of it right now. But Layla is okay. We are going to the children's hospital. They want to monitor her overnight. I'm getting in the car right now. I'm driving to you. Do not tell me not to come because I'm already putting on my shoes. Mama, it is a long drive. I do not care if it is a very long drive. That is my grandchild. I will be there soon. You hear me?" "I hear you, Mama." "And Nicole?" "Yes. You did good, baby. You kept her alive. You remember that. Whatever happens next, you kept her alive." Nicole hung up and pressed the phone against her chest. The paramedic was watching her with the careful, professional compassion of someone who had learned to care without intruding. He did not say anything. He just checked Layla's vitals again and wrote something on his clipboard. They arrived at the children's hospital. Nicole had been memorizing every detail since the moment Brenda first approached her on the plane. The boarding confrontation, the second approach, the demand to turn off the device, the removal of the oxygen tube, the captain's intervention, the landing, Brenda's arrest. Nicole had written all of this on the back of a boarding pass with a pen she borrowed from Frank McKinley, and she kept that boarding pass in the front pocket of her scrubs like it was a piece of evidence. Because it was. The emergency department at the children's hospital moved fast. They had been alerted by the paramedics en route, and a pediatric cardiologist was already waiting. Dr. Carter, a woman with short gray hair and the kind of efficiency that comes from decades of saving small lives, met Nicole at the entrance and took Layla's history in under a couple minutes. Congenital heart defect, ventricular septal, diagnosed at birth, on continuous supplemental oxygen. Oxygen was forcibly interrupted during flight for a short time. Rescue medication administered sublingually by a paramedic on board. Current SATs at a certain level. Is that correct? That is correct, Nicole said. We are going to do an echo, a full blood panel, and I want her on continuous monitoring for some time. If the echo shows any change in function, or if her SATs drop, we move to the PICU. I understand, Nicole said. She paused. Dr. Carter, I am a pediatric nurse. I know what oxygen deprivation can do to a heart that is already compromised. I need you to be straight with me, not as a patient's mother, as a colleague." Dr. Carter looked at her. "The short time of deprivation is concerning, but likely not catastrophic on its own. What concerns me more is the stress response. Her body flooded with adrenaline and cortisol at an age when those systems are immature, and she did that with a heart that already cannot fully oxygenate her blood. We will know more after the echo. But I will be straight with you, Nicole. If there is damage, it may not be immediately visible. We may be looking at follow-up imaging over the coming weeks." Nicole absorbed that. She filed it away in the same place she filed everything else, the place where fear and facts coexisted in a tense, working relationship. "Okay," she said. "Let us get started." While Layla was being examined, Nicole's phone continued to erupt. She finally sat down in the hallway outside the cardiology suite and scrolled through the messages. There were many missed calls. Her sister had texted several times. 2 of her co-workers from the hospital in Chicago had sent messages asking if she was the woman on the news. A nurse she used to work with in the NICU had sent a link to a video with the message, "Nicole, is this you? This is everywhere." Nicole opened the link. It was the video, the one the young mother in the window seat had recorded on her phone. It was a short clip. It showed Brenda standing over Nicole's row. It showed Brenda reaching down. It showed the moment the tube came away from Layla's face. It showed Nicole's scream. It showed Layla's body go rigid. It showed Eleanor stepping into the aisle, and it showed Brenda standing there, arms at her sides, watching a baby suffocate with the calm disinterest of someone watching a pot boil. The video had been posted earlier. It already had a huge number of views. Nicole put the phone down. Her hands were shaking again. She clasped them together and squeezed until her knuckles ached. Then she let go and picked the phone back up. She needed to see something. She scrolled to the comments. The first one said, "That flight attendant should be under the jail." The second one said, "That mother is a hero. She stayed calm and saved her baby's life." The third one said, "This is what racism looks like at high altitude." The fourth one said, "I am crying. That baby turned blue. That flight attendant watched and did nothing." There were thousands of comments. Nicole stopped reading after some because her vision was blurred and she could not see the screen anymore. Later that evening, a woman walked into the hospital and asked at the front desk for Nicole Patterson. She was tall, in her 40s, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had been to more courtrooms than most lawyers see in a lifetime. She was escorted to the cardiology floor and found Nicole sitting in a chair beside Layla's crib, watching the monitor beep. "Nicole Patterson?" Nicole looked up. "Who are you?" "My name is Christina Hale. I am a civil rights attorney. I flew in from Washington. I have been watching the video of what happened to your daughter, and I believe you have a case that goes far beyond one flight attendant on one plane." "I have not asked for a lawyer," Nicole said. "I know you have not, and I am not here to pressure you, but I need you to know something before the airline's legal team contacts you, because they will, probably soon. They are going to offer you a settlement. They are going to ask you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They are going to frame this as an isolated incident involving one rogue employee, and they are going to try to make this go away before the public pressure becomes something they cannot manage." Nicole stared at her. "How do you know all of that?" "Because it is what they always do," Christina said. "I have handled several cases against commercial airlines in recent years. Some involved racial discrimination. Others involved the use of excessive authority against passengers of color. And in every single case, the airline's first move was to contain, control, and silence. I am here because I do not want that to happen to you. How did you even find me? Nicole asked. The video, Christina said. One of my colleagues recognized the airline uniform. We cross-referenced the flight number with the emergency services dispatch at the landing airport. Your name came up in the incident report. I was on a plane soon after. Nicole looked at Layla, who was sleeping peacefully in the hospital crib, the oxygen cannula in place, the monitors glowing green. Then she looked back at Christina. What kind of case are we talking about? Christina set her briefcase on the floor and sat down in the chair beside Nicole. Criminal charges against Brenda Hargrove will be handled by the federal prosecutor. Assault on a minor, child endangerment, potentially a hate crime enhancement. If they can establish racial motivation, which, based on the video and the witness statements I have already been made aware of, they will. But criminal charges are only half of this. The civil case is where the real change happens. The airline knew about Brenda Hargrove. They had complaints on file, multiple incidents involving passengers of color. If we can prove that they ignored a pattern of discriminatory behavior and allowed this woman to continue working in a position of authority over vulnerable passengers, we are not just suing for damages. We are suing for systemic reform. How do you know they had complaints on file? Nicole asked. Because one of the crew members on your flight has already come forward, Christina said. Nicole felt something shift inside her chest. Sarah. Christina nodded. Sarah Mitchell. She contacted an aviation safety hotline soon after the plane landed. She provided a statement describing multiple previous incidents involving Brenda Hargrove and passengers of color. She also stated that she personally informed Brenda that the captain had cleared your device and that Brenda ignored that information and continued to escalate the situation. Sarah Mitchell is willing to testify. Nicole closed her eyes. She thought about Sarah's face in the aisle, the redness around her eyes, the whispered apology, the fear in her voice when she looked over her shoulder before speaking. Sarah had known. She had known, and she had tried in the small, constrained way that junior crew member can try. And when trying was not enough, she had done the one thing that mattered. She had spoken up. What about the other witnesses? Nicole asked. Frank McKinley has already submitted a written statement to the FBI, Christina said. Eleanor Bennett called the airline's corporate office from the terminal and demanded to speak with the CEO. She was transferred several times before someone took her complaint. Michael Torres, the paramedic, has provided a medical statement documenting Layla's condition and the timeline of the oxygen deprivation. And the passenger who recorded the video, a woman named Jessica Ramirez, has agreed to provide her footage to both the FBI and the press. Nicole opened her eyes. You have been busy. I've been doing this for a long time, Christina said, and I have never seen a case this clear. The video alone is devastating, but combined with the witness statements, the crew testimony, the airline's documented history of complaints, and your daughter's medical records, this is not just a case. This is a reckoning. And if I say yes, Nicole asked, if I let you represent me, what happens? First, we file a federal civil rights lawsuit against the airline. We name Brenda Hargrove individually and the airline corporately. We allege racial discrimination, negligence, assault, and failure to protect a vulnerable passenger. Second, we push for a congressional hearing. There is already a senator from Illinois who has seen the video and is publicly calling for an investigation into airline policies regarding medical devices and passengers with disabilities. Third, we use this case to advocate for federal legislation that mandates accountability when airline employees endanger passengers through discriminatory conduct. Legislation? Nicole repeated. A law, Christina said, named after your daughter. Nicole looked at Layla. The baby's chest rose and fell in the steady, reliable rhythm that the oxygen concentrator made possible. The monitor beeped its green, comforting beep. And somewhere in the back of Nicole's mind, in the place where exhaustion meets clarity, a thought formed that was bigger than anger, bigger than fear, bigger than the memory of her daughter's lips turning blue. "If we do this," Nicole said slowly, "I do not want money. I want justice. I want accountability. But I do not want this to be about a settlement check. I want it to be about the next mother, the next baby, the next black woman who boards a plane with everything in order and gets treated like a criminal anyway." Christina looked at her for a long time. "That is exactly why I flew here tonight." Later that night, Nicole's mother arrived. Barbara Patterson walked into that hospital room with the force of a woman who had driven a long way on fury and prayer, and she did not say a word. She walked straight to the crib, looked down at Layla, placed one hand on the baby's chest, and stood there for a full minute, feeling her granddaughter breathe. Then she turned to Nicole and pulled her into a hug so tight that Nicole's ribs ached. "I am here," Barbara said. "I am here, and I am not leaving." "Mama, there is a lawyer," Nicole said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "A civil rights attorney from Washington. She wants to take the case." Barbara pulled back and looked at her daughter. "Good. It is going to be big, Mama. Federal lawsuit, congressional hearing. They are talking about a law. It is going to be public. It is going to be everywhere. Everyone is going to know Layla's name." "Everyone already knows Layla's name," Barbara said. "I saw the video in a gas station in Peoria. A stranger recognized me from the family picture you posted on your Facebook last month. She stopped me at the pump and asked if that was my grandbaby. People are praying, Nicole. Churches I have never heard of are praying for Layla tonight." Nicole sat down on the edge of the hospital bed. "I'm scared, Mama." "Of what?" "Of all of it. The lawsuit, the attention, the pressure. I am a nurse. I take care of sick kids. I'm not a civil rights activist. I do not know how to do this." Barbara sat beside her and took her hand. "You do not have to know how. You just have to know why. And the why is sleeping right there in that crib with a tube in her nose that some hateful woman tried to rip away. That is your why. That has always been your why." Later, Nicole's phone rang. The caller ID showed the airline's corporate office. She looked at Christina, who had stepped out to the hallway to make calls, but came back when she heard the ring. "Do not answer it," Christina said. "Why not?" "Because anything you say to them can be used to frame their response. Let me handle all communication with the airline from this point forward. If they want to talk, they talk to me." Nicole let it ring. It went to voicemail. She played the message on speaker. A man's voice, smooth and practiced, identified himself as the airline's vice president of passenger relations. He expressed deep concern for Layla's well-being. He assured Nicole that the airline was taking the matter extremely seriously. He offered the airlines full cooperation with medical expenses, and then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned that the airline would appreciate the opportunity to discuss the matter privately before any public statements were made. Christina shook her head. There it is: contain, control, silence. That call was not about your daughter's health. That call was about their stock price. How do you know? Nicole asked. Because he did not ask how Layla is doing. He asked to discuss the matter privately. Those are two very different things. Later, Doctor. Carter's came back with the echocardiogram results. Nicole stood up. Barbara stood up. Christina stepped back to give them space. The echo shows no acute change in cardiac function from her baseline, Dr. Carter said. The ventricular septal defect is unchanged. There is no evidence of new damage from the oxygen deprivation event. Nicole exhaled so hard, her whole body shuddered. She is okay. She is stable, Dr. Carter corrected. I want to be precise. The short-term results are reassuring, but I'm recommending follow-up imaging in the coming weeks to monitor for any delayed effects. Oxygen deprivation at this age, even brief in a child with her condition, warrants close surveillance. I understand, Nicole said. There is something else, Dr. Carter said. She paused, choosing her words. I have been a pediatric cardiologist for many years. I have treated thousands of children with congenital heart defects, and I have to tell you what happened to your daughter on that plane was not a medical complication. It was an act of violence, and I will document it as such in my report. Thank you, Nicole whispered. I am not doing it as a favor, Dr. Carter said. I am doing it because it is the truth, and because if this ever goes to court, and I suspect it will, the medical record needs to reflect exactly what happened and who caused it. Barbara reached over and squeezed Nicole's hand. Nicole squeezed back. While Layla slept and Barbara dozed in the recliner beside the crib, Nicole stood at the window of the hospital room and looked out at the city lights below. Her phone had finally gone quiet. The texts had stopped. The calls had stopped. The world outside was moving on to the next story, the next outrage, the next video. But Nicole was not moving on. She was standing still, rooted in the spot where fear meets purpose, and she was making a decision that would change the rest of her life. She pulled out her phone and texted Christina Hale 2 words. I'm in. Soon after, Christina replied, I know. I'll have the filing ready by morning. Nicole put the phone away. She walked to Layla's crib and looked down at her daughter. The baby's face was peaceful. Her lips were pink. Her chest rose and fell with the steady mechanical assistance of the concentrator. And beneath that, the imperfect but determined beating of a heart that refused to quit. They are going to know your name, baby girl, Nicole whispered. And they are going to remember what they did to you. Every single one of them. I promise you that. Layla's hand twitched in her sleep, fingers curling around nothing, grasping at the air the way infants do when they are dreaming about something only they can see. Nicole reached into the crib and offered her finger. Layla grabbed it. Even in sleep, she held on tight. Christina Hale filed the federal civil rights lawsuit the next morning. By later that morning, every major news network in the country had the story. By soon after the airline's stock had dropped. By mid-morning, the hashtag Justice for Layla was trending #1 on every social media platform in America. And Nicole Patterson's phone had stopped working entirely because the voicemail box was full and the text messages were coming in faster than the device could process them. Nicole did not see any of this. She was sitting in Layla's hospital room feeding her daughter a bottle while a nurse checked the baby's vitals. She was sitting in the same chair she had been sitting in all night because she had not slept. She had not eaten. She had not changed out of the scrubs she had worn on the plane. She had simply sat there hour after hour watching the monitor, counting the beeps, making sure the numbers stayed green. Barbara had gone to the cafeteria to get coffee and came back with her face twisted in an expression Nicole had never seen before. It was somewhere between pride and terror. Baby, Barbara said, setting the coffee down with a trembling hand. There are news vans outside the hospital. How many? Nicole asked. I stopped counting at several. Nicole closed her eyes. She had known this was coming. Christina had warned her. The video had many views by then. By morning, it would be everywhere. And it was. Later that morning, Christina arrived at the hospital with a legal assistant and 2 phones that were both ringing simultaneously. She silenced them, sat down across from Nicole, and got straight to it. 3 things have happened since I filed this morning, Christina said. First, the airline has issued a public statement expressing concern for Layla's well-being and calling Brenda Hargrove's actions inconsistent with their values. They are distancing themselves from her as fast as they can. Of course they are, Nicole said. Second, the federal prosecutor's office has confirmed that Brenda Hargrove has been charged with assault on a minor child endangerment and interference with the operation of a commercial aircraft. She was arraigned this morning. Bail was set at a high amount. Nicole looked up. Did she make bail? She did. Someone posted it for her within an hour. We do not know who yet. Nicole felt her jaw tighten. The woman who had tried to kill her daughter was already out, already free, already breathing air that she had tried to take from an infant baby. And the third thing, Nicole asked. Christina paused. The third thing is bigger. Senator Elizabeth Morgan from Illinois has publicly called for a congressional hearing into discriminatory practices by commercial airlines against passengers of color. She cited your case specifically. She wants you to testify. Nicole stared at her. Testify before Congress? Before the Senate Commerce Committee. It would be a formal hearing televised with testimony from you, from airline industry representatives, from the FAA, and from civil rights organizations. Senator Morgan believes your case is the catalyst for federal legislation. Barbara set her coffee down so hard it sloshed over the rim. My daughter is not a politician. She is a nurse with a sick baby. You want her to sit in front of Congress and relive the worst day of her life on national television. Mrs. Patterson, I understand your concern, Christina said. And no one is going to pressure Nicole into anything. But I want you both to understand the opportunity. Congressional testimony does not just tell your story. It forces the people with power to listen. It creates a record. It builds the foundation for a law that could protect every mother who boards a plane with a medically fragile child. A law, Barbara repeated. Layla's law, Christina said. That is what Senator Morgan is calling it. The room went quiet. Layla made a small sound in her crib, a half coo, half gurgle, that babies make when they are content and the world has not yet taught them to be afraid. Nicole reached into the crib and adjusted the cannula. Her fingers were steady. Her mind was not. When? Nicole asked. In some weeks. The hearing is scheduled for some time from now. I will do it, Nicole said. Barbara opened her mouth to protest, but Nicole held up her hand. Mama, I will do it. Not because I want to, because if I do not, the next Brenda Hargrove is going to do the same thing to someone else's baby, and there will be no cameras and no witnesses and no one will ever know. Barbara looked at her daughter the way mothers look at their children. When they realize the person in front of them is no longer the child they raised, but someone larger, someone harder, someone shaped by a pain they wish they could have prevented. She nodded once, pressed her lips together, and picked up her coffee. Later that afternoon, Nicole was discharged from the hospital with Layla. Dr. Carter had cleared the baby for release with strict instructions for follow-up appointments and continuous oxygen monitoring. As Nicole walked through the hospital lobby, a security guard met her at the elevator. Ma'am, we have been asked to escort you through a side exit. The media presence at the main entrance is significant. Nicole stopped walking. She looked at the security guard. Then she looked at her mother. Then she looked down at Layla in the carrier. No, Nicole said. We are going out the front. Ma'am, I strongly recommend. I heard your recommendation, and I appreciate it, but I spent an entire flight being told to be quiet, to comply, to not make a scene. I am done being quiet. We are going out the front. They went out the front. The moment the doors opened, the cameras hit her like a wall of light. Reporters surged forward, microphones extended, voices overlapping in a wave of questions that crashed over each other before any single one could be understood. Nicole walked through them without stopping. She did not answer questions. She did not make a statement. She held Layla close and walked to the car her mother had pulled to the curb, and she got in and closed the door. But she did one thing. As she walked past the cameras, she lifted Layla slightly so the world could see her daughter's face. Pink cheeks, dark eyes, the nasal cannula running to the portable concentrator in Nicole's bag. Alive, breathing, fighting. That image was on the front page of every newspaper in America the next morning. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal preparation and public attention that Nicole could never have anticipated. Christina's team worked around the clock, building the civil case against the airline. They subpoenaed employment records. They deposed crew members. They obtained internal emails. And what they found was worse than anyone had expected. Brenda Hargrove had been the subject of multiple formal complaints over the years. Several of them involved passengers of color. Some involved passengers with medical devices. Others involved families traveling with young children. In every single case, the airline's internal review had concluded with the same determination. No action warranted. Brenda had been given a verbal counseling once some time ago for being unnecessarily firm with a wheelchair-bound passenger. That was it. Multiple complaints, one verbal counseling, 0 consequences. Christina laid the documents out on the conference table at her Washington office and looked at Nicole. This is what institutional racism looks like when it gets documented. Not burning crosses and white hoods, memos and filing cabinets. A system that absorbs complaints and buries them until someone's child nearly dies on camera. Did they know? Nicole asked. The people who reviewed these complaints, did they know what she was? They knew enough, Christina said. One complaint came from a black physician traveling with his family. He wrote that Brenda Hargrove subjected his wife to repeated bag inspections, refused to serve her a beverage, and told another crew member within earshot that she was tired of passengers who think they can do whatever they want. He filed a formal written complaint. The airline's response was a form letter apologizing for the inconvenience. A form letter, Nicole repeated. Standard template. We have seen the same letter sent to several of the complainants. Word for word identical. Nicole sat back in her chair. So they knew. They had the evidence. They had the pattern, and they chose to do nothing because she had seniority and a union card. Seniority, union protection, and the simple fact that none of the previous complainants had video, Christina said. You had video. That changed everything. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Brenda Hargrove was building momentum. The federal prosecutor, a man named Anthony Brooks, had assembled a team that was treating the case with the seriousness of a civil rights prosecution. Brenda had hired a defense attorney, a high-profile name out of Dallas named Thomas Blackwell, who had already begun laying the groundwork for her defense in the media. Nicole first heard Blackwell's strategy on television sometime after the incident, when her mother called her into the living room and said, "You need to see this." Thomas Blackwell was on television. He was standing in front of a courthouse, microphones bristling around him, delivering a statement with the calm confidence of a man who had spent decades spinning ugly truths into palatable narratives. My client, Brenda Hargrove, is a decorated flight attendant with years of exemplary service. Blackwell said. She acted in good faith based on her understanding of aircraft safety protocols. At no point did she intend to harm anyone. The device in question was producing an unusual sound, and Ms. Hargrove, acting out of an abundance of caution for the safety of all passengers on that aircraft, made a judgment call. It was the wrong call. She acknowledges that, but a wrong call is not a crime. It is a mistake made under pressure by a professional who has dedicated her career to passenger safety. Nicole felt something cold settle in her stomach. He is making her the victim. Barbara shook her head. That man looked straight into the camera and said she ripped oxygen off a baby's face because of a funny noise, like she was fixing a coffee maker. He is good, Nicole said quietly. He is really good. She called Christina that night. Tell me the truth. Can they win with this? Christina did not hesitate. No, they cannot. The captain has already provided a statement confirming that he cleared the device and that there were no system anomalies. Sarah Mitchell has testified that she personally told Brenda the device was approved. Frank McKinley's statement documents Brenda's pre-planned intent to have you removed, and the video shows Brenda standing motionless while your daughter suffocated. Blackwell can spin all he wants, but he cannot spin a baby turning blue on camera. What about the discrimination angle? Nicole asked. If they argue it was just a safety mistake, how do we prove it was racial? We prove it with the complaints. We prove it with the crew testimony. We prove it with Brenda's own words. Women like you. That phrase is on the video. Jessica Ramirez's recording captured it. Blackwell does not know that yet. We are saving it. Nicole exhaled. When does the trial start? In some weeks, federal court. And Nicole, before the trial, you have the congressional hearing soon. I need you ready for that. I am ready, Nicole said. You think you are? Christina said. But ready means more than knowing your story. It means sitting in front of senators who will try to politicize your daughter's suffering. It means hearing the airline's representatives minimize what happened to you. It means holding yourself together on national television while people question whether you are telling the truth. Are you ready for that? I have been questioned my entire life, Nicole said. I was questioned walking onto that plane. I was questioned presenting my documentation. I was questioned while my baby was on oxygen. The only difference now is that the questions will be in a prettier room. Christina was quiet for a moment. Nicole, I have represented a lot of people in my career, and I need you to know that you are the strongest client I have ever had. I am not strong, Nicole said. I am angry. There is a difference. The congressional hearing was held one morning some weeks later. The Senate Commerce Committee convened in a hearing room that was packed to capacity. Every seat in the gallery was taken. Cameras lined the back wall. The air was thick with the particular tension that exists when powerful people are forced to confront something they would rather ignore. Senator Elizabeth Morgan opened the hearing with a statement that lasted a few minutes. She spoke about the rights of air passengers. She spoke about the FAA's responsibility to ensure safety for all travelers. She spoke about the disproportionate rate at which passengers of color are subjected to unnecessary scrutiny, removal, and force on commercial aircraft. And then she said the name that had brought everyone into that room. Today we will hear testimony from Nicole Patterson, the mother of infant Layla Patterson, whose life-sustaining medical oxygen was forcibly removed by a flight attendant during a domestic flight. This hearing is not about one incident. It is about a system that allowed that incident to happen, and that until now has faced no accountability for the pattern of behavior that preceded it. Nicole walked to the witness table. She wore her scrubs, not a suit, not a dress, her scrubs. Christina had suggested professional attire. Nicole had said no. She was a nurse. That was who she was. That was who she had been when she boarded that plane. She was not going to pretend to be anything else. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked up at the row of senators. Several faces, some sympathetic, some neutral, some already looking at their phones. She took one breath and began. My name is Nicole Patterson. I am a young mother. I am a pediatric nurse at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. My daughter, Layla, is an infant. She was born with a ventricular septal defect, which means there is a hole in her heart that prevents her from adequately oxygenating her blood. She requires continuous supplemental oxygen delivered through a portable concentrator that is approved by the FAA for use on commercial aircraft. She paused. The room was silent. On the day in question, I boarded a flight with every piece of documentation required by the airline and by federal regulation. I had a physician's letter. I had the FAA approval listing. I had confirmation from the airline's own customer service department. I did everything right, and it did not matter because the moment I walked onto that plane, the senior flight attendant decided that I did not belong there. A senator from Texas, a man named Robert Langford, who was known for being sympathetic to the airline industry, interrupted. Miss Patterson, are you suggesting that the flight attendant's actions were motivated by racial bias because the formal charges do not currently include a hate crime enhancement? Nicole looked at him. Senator, I am not suggesting anything. I am telling you what happened. The flight attendant looked at my documentation and handled it like it was trash. She lied about the device interfering with navigation systems. She told me, and these are her exact words, women like you always think the rules do not apply to you. And then she ripped the oxygen tube off my daughter's face and watched her turn blue. You can call that whatever you want. I know what it was. The gallery stirred. Senator Morgan leaned forward. Senator Langford leaned back. Nicole continued, but I am not here today just to talk about what happened to me and Layla. I am here because what happened to us has happened before, multiple times by the airline's own records. Complaints against the same flight attendant, several involving passengers of color. And in those complaints, the airline took no meaningful action, not once. She held up a printed page. This is the form letter the airline sent to a black physician who filed a complaint after the same flight attendant harassed his wife. Word for word. It is the same letter they sent to several other complainants. It says, and I quote, "We take all passenger feedback seriously and have addressed the matter internally." That is not accountability. That is a copy machine. Laughter rippled through the gallery, but it was bitter, angry laughter, the kind that comes when people recognize a truth they have been living with for years. I am here to ask this committee for one thing, Nicole said. I am asking for a law, a federal law that requires airlines to maintain transparent records of passenger complaints involving discrimination. A law that mandates independent review of those complaints, not internal review by the airline's own staff. A law that holds airlines financially and criminally liable when they allow a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior to continue unchecked. A law that says, what happened to my daughter will never happen to another child on an American aircraft. She paused. She looked down at her hands, then back up at the senators. I named that law after my daughter, Layla's law, because she cannot speak for herself. She is an infant, and she is in the arms of her grandmother right now, breathing through a tube, because her heart does not work the way it should. But her heart works well enough to love. It works well enough to smile. It works well enough to grab my finger every morning when I pick her up from her crib. And that heart deserves to beat without someone deciding it is not worth protecting. The gallery erupted. not applause, something deeper. A sound that was half grief and half fury. The sound of hundreds of people recognizing that the woman sitting at that witness table was not just fighting for her daughter. She was fighting for every person who had ever been told in 1,000 small and large ways that their body, their child, their life was worth less than someone else's comfort. Senator Morgan banged the gavel once. The room settled. "Miss Patterson," Morgan said, "on behalf of this committee, I want to thank you for your testimony and for your courage. You have our attention, and I give you my word that this committee will act on what we have heard today." Nicole nodded. She stood. She walked away from the witness table, and as she passed through the gallery doors, she heard something that stopped her. Eleanor Bennett, who had driven a long way from her home to be there, who had sat in the gallery with Frank McKinley on one side and Michael Torres on the other, said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "That is what a mother sounds like." Nicole did not turn around. She kept walking. She walked through the hallway past the cameras, past the reporters calling her name, past the people reaching out to touch her arm or shake her hand. She walked until she found the room where Barbara was waiting with Layla. She took her daughter from her mother's arms, sat down in a chair, and held her. Layla blinked up at her and smiled the same trusting, open-faced smile she always gave. The smile that did not know what Congress was or what a hearing meant or why her mother was crying. Nicole pressed her lips to Layla's forehead and whispered, "I told them your name, baby girl. I told them your name and they listened." Her phone buzzed. A text from Christina. "Several senators have signed on to the bill. It is going to committee vote soon." Nicole read it twice. She looked at Layla. She looked at her mother. And for the first time since that flight, for the first time since Brenda Hargrove's fingers closed around her daughter's oxygen tube, Nicole Patterson allowed herself to believe that something good might actually come from the worst moment of her life. Barbara saw the expression on her daughter's face and reached for her hand. "What is it?" "Several senators, Mama. They are going to vote on the law." Barbara squeezed her hand. The same number as the complaints they ignored. Nicole had not made that connection. But now that her mother said it, she could not unhear it. Complaints buried. Senators rising. The same number. Like the universe was balancing an equation that had been wrong for a very long time. Outside the building, the cameras were still rolling. Inside the building, the senators were still talking. And somewhere in a federal detention facility in a city Nicole did not care about, Brenda Hargrove was watching the hearing on a television bolted to the wall, watching the woman she had tried to silence speak in a voice that could not be silenced, and for the first time understanding that what she had set in motion on that plane was not just a scandal or a lawsuit or a news cycle. It was a reckoning that was coming for her with the full weight of a nation behind it, and there was no galley to hide in, no inner phone to pick up, no authority to wield. There was only the truth spoken by a mother in scrubs, and there was no amount of seniority in the world that could make it go away. The trial of Brenda Hargrove began one morning sometime later, and the first thing she did when she walked into that federal courtroom was smile. She smiled at the bailiff. She smiled at the court reporter. She smiled at the gallery, which was packed so tightly that people were standing against the back wall. She smiled like a woman arriving at a company luncheon, not a woman facing several federal charges, including assault on a minor, child endangerment, interference with a flight crew, and civil rights violations. Thomas Blackwell, her attorney, walked beside her in a charcoal suit and silver tie, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Nicole made in a month. And he smiled too. They sat down at the defense table like two people who had already decided this was going to be easy. Nicole watched them from the gallery. Barbara sat on her left. Christina sat on her right. Layla was not there. She was home with Nicole's sister, because Nicole had decided long ago that her daughter would never be in the same room as Brenda Hargrove again. Not ever. Not for any reason. "She is smiling," Barbara whispered. "Let her smile," Nicole said. "She will not be smiling when this is over." Federal prosecutor Anthony Brooks stood and delivered his opening statement. He was a man who spoke the way surgeons cut, precise, deliberate, and without wasted motion. He did not raise his voice. He did not use dramatic pauses. He simply laid out the facts in an order so clean and so devastating that by the time he finished, the jury was not looking at Brenda Hargrove anymore. They were looking at the floor. "On the afternoon in question," Brooks said, "the defendant, a senior flight attendant with years of service, made a series of deliberate choices. She chose to challenge a mother's FAA-approved medical equipment, despite having no legitimate safety concern. She chose to fabricate a claim that the device was interfering with aircraft navigation, a claim the captain has confirmed was false. She chose to threaten the mother with removal from the flight, and when the mother, a pediatric nurse who knew her rights and knew the regulations, refused to disable the device that was keeping her infant daughter alive, the defendant chose to physically remove the oxygen supply from a baby with a congenital heart defect. The baby stopped breathing. The baby turned blue, and the defendant stood there and watched. He paused, not for drama, for the jury to absorb what he had just said. This was not a mistake. This was not a misjudgment. This was an act of cruelty committed by a person in a position of authority against the most vulnerable passenger on that aircraft, a baby who could not speak, could not protest, could not defend herself. And the evidence will show that this act was not random. It was the culmination of a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior that the airline knew about and chose to ignore. Thomas Blackwell's opening statement came next, and it was exactly what Christina had predicted. He painted Brenda as a dedicated professional who had spent years keeping passengers safe. He described the pressures of the job, the split-second decisions flight attendants must make, the responsibility they carry for every soul on board. He called the incident a tragic misunderstanding rooted in a genuine, if mistaken, concern for safety. He said Brenda had never intended to harm anyone. He said she was devastated by what happened. He used the word regret several times. He did not mention race, mau, pepu, jeez, not once. Nicole leaned over to Christina. "He is avoiding it." "Of course he is," Christina whispered back. "If he acknowledges race, he opens the door to the pattern evidence. He wants the jury to see this as a one-time mistake, not a lifetime of bias. Anthony is going to kick that door wide open." The prosecution's first witness was Captain Robert Hayes. He took the stand in his uniform, sat straight-backed in the chair, and answered every question with the clarity of a man who had been replaying this flight in his head for some time. "Captain Hayes, did you review and approve the portable oxygen concentrator brought aboard by Ms. Patterson?" Brooks asked. "I did, prior to departure. All documentation was in order. The device was on the FAA-approved list. I personally confirmed there was no safety concern. Did you at any point instruct any member of your crew to ask Ms. Patterson to disable or remove the device?" "I did not." "Were there any alerts, warnings, or system anomalies related to the device during the flight?" "None whatsoever." When the defendant told Ms. Patterson that the device was interfering with navigation systems, was that statement true? It was completely false. There was no interference of any kind. The defendant fabricated that claim. Blackwell stood for cross-examination and tried to suggest that communication errors between cockpit and cabin crew were common. That Brenda may have genuinely believed there was an issue. Captain Hayes shut it down in one sentence. "Mr. Blackwell, I have been flying commercial aircraft for many years. There was no miscommunication. The defendant lied." The courtroom stirred. The judge called for order. The prosecution's second witness was Sarah Mitchell. She walked to the stand with the nervous energy of someone who knew exactly what she was about to do and exactly what it would cost her. She had been placed on administrative leave by the airline soon after she contacted the aviation safety hotline. She had been told the leave was routine pending investigation. Everyone knew it was retaliation. Everyone knew it, and no one at the airline would say it out loud. "Ms. Mitchell," Brooks said, "on the day of the incident, did you have a conversation with the defendant regarding the medical device?" "I did. I told Brenda that the captain had cleared the device. I told her there was no issue. I told her specifically that the passenger had all required documentation." "And what was the defendant's response?" Sarah took a breath. "She told me to mind my own business and stay in the back." "Did the defendant offer any legitimate safety reason for her continued interference with the passenger?" "No. She never cited a specific safety concern to me, not once. She just kept going back to that row." "In your experience working with the defendant, had you observed a similar behavior before?" Blackwell stood. "Objection. Calls for speculation about prior conduct." "Your Honor, the prosecution intends to establish a pattern of behavior directly relevant to the charges," Brooks said. "Overruled. The witness may answer." Sarah looked at the jury. "Yes, I had seen it before. Not exactly the same, but the same energy. Brenda had a way of targeting certain passengers. It was always extra scrutiny, extra questions, extra hostility. And it was always directed at passengers of color. Everyone on the crew knew. We talked about it among ourselves. But nobody reported it because Brenda had seniority and the union protected her. And we all knew that the complaints went into a file and nothing happened." "How many incidents did you personally witness?" Brooks asked. "Several over the time I worked with her." "And in those incidents, were the targeted passengers white?" "No, they were all black or brown, every single one." The courtroom was silent. Not the silence of boredom. The silence of people hearing something they already suspected confirmed under oath. The prosecution called several more witnesses over the next few days. Frank McKinley delivered his testimony with the methodical precision of a man who had spent years investigating misconduct. He recounted every statement, every action he had observed. He told the jury about overhearing Brenda on the intercom, planning to have Nicole removed before she ever touched the device. He described the look on Brenda's face when she stood watching Layla gasp for air. "It was not shock," Frank said. "It was not panic. It was satisfaction. She looked satisfied." Eleanor Bennett took the stand and spoke with the fierce clarity of a woman who had spent years running a school and had zero tolerance for cruelty. She described stepping into the aisle to physically block Brenda from Nicole's row. She described Brenda's refusal to acknowledge her, and she described the moment she looked into Nicole's eyes and saw a mother trying to save her child from a person who was supposed to protect them both. "I have dealt with bullies my entire career," Eleanor told the jury, "in hallways and classrooms and faculty meetings, and I know the difference between someone who makes a mistake and someone who enjoys their power over another human being. Brenda Hargrove enjoyed it. I saw it in her face." Michael Torres, the paramedic, testified about the medical timeline. He described Layla's condition when he reached her: the cyanosis, the rapid heart rate, the shallow breathing. He described administering the rescue medication and monitoring the baby's vitals for the remainder of the flight. and he said something that made several members of the jury visibly flinch. If the oxygen had been disconnected for a little longer, given the severity of her cardiac defect, that baby could have gone into cardiac arrest. At high altitude without a pediatric crash cart, the survival rate would have been very low. Jessica Ramirez, the young mother who had recorded the video, testified, and then the prosecution played the footage for the jury. A short clip. The courtroom watched Brenda reach down. They watched the tube come away. They watched Layla's body seize. They watched Nicole scream. They watched Brenda stand motionless while a baby suffocated. And then they heard it. The moment that Thomas Blackwell did not know was coming. The audio, clear as a church bell on a Sunday morning. Brenda's voice low and sharp, captured by Jessica's phone. Women like you always think the rules do not apply to you. The jury heard it. The gallery heard it. The judge heard it. Brenda Hargrove, sitting at the defense table, heard her own voice played back to her in a federal courtroom. And for the first time since the trial began, she stopped smiling. Blackwell asked for a recess. The judge granted a short break. When court resumed, Blackwell's strategy had visibly shifted. He put Brenda on the stand. It was a gamble. Everyone in that courtroom knew it was a gamble. But Blackwell was out of options. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were credible. The video was devastating. His only remaining play was to put a human face on his client and hope the jury could find sympathy. Brenda Hargrove took the stand. She wore a simple dress and no jewelry. Her hair was down, softer than it had been on the plane. She looked smaller. She looked older. She looked like someone who had been coached to appear vulnerable. Brooks approached her for cross-examination. Ms. Hargrove, you testified that you believed the oxygen concentrator was interfering with the aircraft's navigation system. Is that correct? Yes, that was my belief at the time. And what was the basis for that belief? I heard an unusual sound coming from the device. It concerned me. Ms. Hargrove, the device in question is a portable oxygen concentrator that operates at a normal noise level. Are you telling this jury that a sound caused you to believe an FAA-approved medical device was interfering with a commercial aircraft's navigation system? Brenda hesitated. I was acting on my judgment. Your judgment. Let us talk about your judgment. When the captain personally confirmed that the device was cleared and that there were no system anomalies, did that change your judgment? I was not aware that Sarah Mitchell testified under oath that she personally told you the captain cleared the device. Are you saying she is lying? I am saying I do not recall that conversation. You do not recall. Ms. Hargrove, when you told Nicole Patterson, and I quote from the audio recording played for this jury, women like you always think the rules do not apply to you. What did you mean by women like you? The courtroom held its breath. Brenda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I meant passengers who do not comply with crew instructions. Passengers who do not comply, Brooks repeated. Ms. Hargrove, in your years as a flight attendant, have you ever physically removed a medical device from a white passenger? Objection, Blackwell said. Goes to pattern, Your Honor. Overruled. No, Brenda said quietly. Have you ever told a white passenger that their FAA-approved device was interfering with navigation systems? No. Have you ever stood motionless while a white infant struggled to breathe? Objection. Withdrawn. Brooks said. He did not need the answer. The jury already had it. The defense rested. The prosecution rested. Closing arguments consumed another day. And soon after, the jury returned. Nicole was sitting in the gallery. Barbara was beside her. Christina was beside Barbara. Behind them sat Eleanor Bennett, Frank McKinley, Michael Torres, and Jessica Ramirez. They had all come back. Every single one of them. Strangers who had been thrown together on a flight and who were now bound together by something none of them had asked for, but none of them would walk away from. The four persons stood. The judge asked for the verdict. Guilty on every count. Guilty on assault on a minor. Guilty on child endangerment. Guilty on interference with the operation of a commercial aircraft. Guilty on deprivation of civil rights under color of authority. And the other charges. Several charges, all guilty verdicts, unanimous on every single one. Brenda Hargrove did not move. She sat at the defense table with her hands flat on the surface and stared straight ahead. No tears, no collapse, no dramatic breakdown. She just sat there frozen the way a person freezes when the thing they always believed would protect them, their authority, their seniority, their position, their skin, suddenly and completely fails. The courtroom erupted, not in cheers, in something heavier. Relief, grief, vindication. The sound of people exhaling a breath they had been holding for a while. Nicole did not make a sound. She sat perfectly still, eyes closed, hands folded in her lap. Barbara was crying beside her, gripping her arm, whispering, "They did it, baby. They did it." Eleanor was on her feet. Frank was shaking Michael's hand. Jessica had her phone out recording because that was what she did now. She recorded truth. The sentencing came some time later. Brenda Hargrove was sentenced to years in federal prison for the assault and endangerment charges and the civil rights violations. She was also barred for life from working in any capacity in the commercial aviation industry. As the judge delivered the sentence, he said something that Nicole would carry with her for the rest of her life. "Miss Hargrove, you were entrusted with the safety of every passenger on that aircraft. You used that trust as a weapon against a mother and her critically ill child. The court finds your actions not only criminal, but profoundly incompatible with the responsibilities you swore to uphold. This sentence reflects not only the severity of your conduct, but the court's recognition that unchecked authority, when wielded with prejudice, becomes a danger to every citizen it claims to protect." Brenda was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She did not look back. She did not look at Nicole. She did not look at anyone. The civil case against the airline was settled sometime later. The airline agreed to a comprehensive overhaul of its complaint review process, mandatory bias training for all employees, the creation of an independent oversight board for discrimination complaints, and a financial settlement that Nicole directed into a trust for Layla's ongoing medical care, and a foundation dedicated to advocating for the rights of medically fragile passengers. But the real victory came one afternoon in Washington, D.C., sometime later, when Senator Elizabeth Morgan stood on the floor of the United States Senate and called for a vote on Layla's law. The bill had survived committee. It had survived amendments. It had survived lobbying from the airline industry. And now it stood before the full Senate, carried by the weight of a story that had started with one mother, one baby, and one oxygen tube. The vote passed with a strong majority. Layla's law passed. Nicole was in the gallery. Layla was in her arms. Barbara was beside her. Christina was behind her. Eleanor, Frank, Michael, and Jessica were scattered through the gallery like seeds from the same tree, planted in different rows, but rooted in the same soil. When the vote was announced, Nicole looked down at Layla. The baby was older now. She was bigger, stronger. Her cardiologist had reported at the last checkup that her oxygen needs were decreasing slowly, steadily, the way a body heals when it is given time and care. and the stubborn refusal of a mother who will not let anything take her child from this world. Layla looked up at Nicole and said the word she had learned recently, the word she said constantly now, the word that made Nicole cry every single time she heard it. Mama. Nicole pulled her close. Yes, baby, Mama is right here. Barbara put her hand on Nicole's shoulder. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you, she said. Your great-grandmother would have marched to Washington herself to see this day. They are here, Mama, Nicole said. They have been here the whole time. That evening, Nicole stood outside the Senate building with Layla on her hip. Reporters were gone. Cameras were gone. The crowd had dispersed. It was just Nicole and her daughter, and the fading light of a day that had changed the laws of a nation. Her phone buzzed, a text from Eleanor Bennett. I am watching the news. They just showed the vote. I am sitting in my living room crying like a baby. You did it, honey. You did it. A text from Frank McKinley. Justice delivered. Proud to have been a witness, proud to know you. A text from Michael Torres. Layla's law has a nice ring to it. Give that little fighter a high five from me. A text from Jessica Ramirez. That short video changed the world. Thank you for letting me be part of it. A text from Sarah Mitchell. I got my job back today. New airline, clean start. Thank you, Nicole, for everything. Nicole read every message. She saved every message. And then she put the phone in her pocket and looked at Layla, who was chewing on her own fist and drooling with the magnificent indifference of a toddler who had no idea she had just become the namesake of a federal law. You know what, baby girl? Nicole said. Someday I'm going to tell you this whole story. All of it. The plane, the woman, the tube, the trial, the law. I'm going to tell you about Eleanor and Frank and Michael and Jessica and Sarah. I'm going to tell you about your grandma driving a long way on fury and prayer. I'm going to tell you about a lawyer who flew from Washington because she believed your story mattered. And I'm going to tell you about a day when many senators said your name and voted to make sure no one ever does what was done to you again. Layla grabbed Nicole's nose and squeezed. Nicole laughed, the first real full laugh she had allowed herself in a while, and the sound of it echoed off the stone walls and up into the evening sky. She started walking, one foot in front of the other, her daughter on her hip, the oxygen concentrator humming in the bag on her shoulder, the law of the land at her back. Nicole Patterson was a young mother. She was a pediatric nurse. She was a mother. And she had just proven to every person who had ever been told they did not belong, every mother who had ever been questioned, every child who had ever been endangered by the cruelty of someone in power. That one voice, steady and unafraid, could shake the foundations of a system that had been failing them for generations. Layla's heart still had a hole in it, but the world around that heart was a little more whole than it had been before. And that was enough. For now, walking through the fading light, with her daughter's laughter still ringing in her ears, that was more than enough. In the end, this story isn't really about a cruel flight attendant, or even about one terrifying moment at 30,000 feet. It's about the unbreakable power of a mother's love and the quiet courage it takes to stand your ground when the world tries to tell you that you and your child don't belong. Nicole Patterson walked onto that plane armed with nothing but paperwork, love, and the fierce determination to protect her baby girl. And when everything around her crumbled, complete strangers became her shield. Eleanor, Frank, Michael, and Jessica didn't have to speak up, but they did. They chose humanity over silence, and together they reminded us that real change often begins when ordinary people refuse to look away. The greatest lesson here is simple yet profound. Never underestimate the strength that rises when a mother fights for her child. And never underestimate what happens when good people decide that injustice will not pass unchallenged on their watch. Layla's heart still carries a hole, but because of that love and those voices, the world around it grew a little stronger, a little kinder, and a lot more just. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it made you hug your own kids a little tighter, or remember a time when someone stood up for you, drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done if you were sitting on that plane? Which part moved you the most? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join this community of people who refuse to stay silent. Your voice matters. Let's keep telling the truth together.